Now, yesterday, the International Criminal Court issued some arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Foreign Minister Gallant, and also a number of Hamas leaders as well. Now, here to discuss that with me on the show today is Alec Cave. Welcome to the show, Alec.
Hi, thanks for having me on, David.
No, really good to have you on. And so we've got this ruling or statement from the International Criminal Court, particularly when it concerns the two Israelis, Netanyahu and Gallant, and the arrest warrant for them. Do you think that that is justified?
Personally, I don't give much stock to the whole idea of international law. I think it's kind of ridiculous. Of course, we've had the invasion of Ukraine of Russia, and we similarly had calls for arrest warrants for Putin. But do these ever manifest? Does this ever actually happen? No, it doesn't. So it's kind of I guess you could say it's a virtue signal, really, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, international law, right? You only have law and order if you have sovereignty. Someone has to have the authority to exert it. The international order is inherently anarchic, right? Who's going to go and arrest these people if they're deemed by some court to be, going too far, let's say, with war crimes or, causing humanitarian crises? Who's going to go and do it? Israel's a sovereign state. So I just see it as a bit worthless, really.
The thing with this is, though, I mean, it will have an effect to some extent on where they can travel, because Putin was going to go to a BRICS conference in South Africa, but he didn't go after the ICC issued an arrest warrant for him, because the South Africans said they're not going to arrest him because obviously he's an ally to a lot of African countries, but someone could have done something. But with Netanyahu, it's maybe a little bit more restrictive, because now he isn't going to be able to travel to many countries around the world, because if he goes to another country which is in the ICC or recognizes the ICC, obviously the United States doesn't, so he can still go there. But if he can't really travel to a European country, because they would be obliged to arrest him and turn him in, wouldn't they?
Well, perhaps, but as we know, Israel is heavily backed by the United States, the most powerful country in the entire world. So I think a lot of European countries would feel a little bit nervous about arresting the Prime Minister of Israel, considering.
Yeah, and so therefore, what you said is true, that it's maybe just virtue signaling and, just an act which isn't going to do much to change the situation. But I mean, what concerns me more about everything going on is that people are still being slaughtered. Obviously there was October the 7th, that was horrendous. And then what's been happening in Gaza since then is even more horrendous. And the thing is, we keep asking, well, we say, well, they did this, they did that, they did this. We got this arrest warrant, that arrest warrant. But, the thing is, how are we going to stop the slaughter? I mean, that's the only question we should be asking, particularly at the moment as Israel is bombing Rafah, which is where the vast majority of Gazans have been corralled into. And now they're getting bombed as well. I mean, is there any way that we can actually have a ceasefire and then stop this from escalating anymore?
Yeah, certainly, obviously, the main concern is stopping the tragic ending of human life. We want an end to the conflict. So, having this court ruling, it doesn't do nothing, right? I'm skeptical as to whether anything will come of it, but it does send a signal nonetheless, doesn't it? That internationally, people are looking at what's going on and they do not approve of what's going on. Many people, look at the frankly over heavy-handed response from Israel since October, and people are very much disgusted by it. There's humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and it just doesn't seem to be stopping, does it? It just keeps escalating, and Israel just will not withdraw. They will not hold back. They are hell-bent. And when we saw Netanyahu's response to this ruling, he pulled out all of the tropes, evoking the Holocaust, the Nazis. He was saying that it's outrageous that you're creating a moral equivalence between me and Hamas leaders. But of course, they always like to completely just forget about the previous 70 years, don't they? As if like, oh, history started on October the 7th. So yeah, but it sends a strong signal. Will it, to a significant degree, change, the course of things? Will Israel rein themselves in? Well, no, because just look at kind of how arrogant and belligerent Netanyahu's response was.
Yeah, I mean, what you say is absolutely true. What happened on October the 7th didn't just come out of nowhere in a vacuum. Just like when Putin started his special military operation in Ukraine in 2022, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. He didn't get up one morning and say, "I'm going to invade Ukraine." Hamas didn't just get up one morning and say, "I'm going to do this in Israel." There are years and years of conflict and strife and other actions leading up to this on both sides. And in Israel, it goes right back to the 1940s. So you can say, well, they did this, they did that, they did this, they did that. But well, the thing is, who's going to stop it? But yeah, the thing is, there is almost a psychological operation here in the UK to get people to support Israel. And because if anyone says anything against Israel, they're smeared as an anti-Semite. I've been smeared myself. I mean, people, and I'm neutral. I'm not pro-Israel. I'm not pro-Palestine. I'm just wanting an end to the slaughter. But I'm not supporting Israel because what they're doing is horrendous. But there are some people who say, well, you're anti-Semitic there because you don't support Israel. And I think this is just nonsense. What do you make of this and how we're being manipulated here in this country to take a side on this conflict going on in Israel and Palestine?
Yeah, well, the British state obviously has always been an ally of Israel. So the status quo has always been pro-Zionist. But it's never been particularly super intense and in your face in this country. Whereas when you look across the pond in the United States, it is so rammed down your throat. It is so entwined, isn't it? This pro-Israel sentiment with the conservative movement. And since October, we've seen that almost replicated in this country. I found it like bewildering. Like all of a sudden, all of these kind of centre-right establishment conservative figures are all banging the drum about how we have to support Israel. And frankly, I never gave any regard to this small country in the Middle East before until fairly recently. But now I'm being told I must support this country. Unconditionally. And it's like, hang on, where's this come from? Why is this? I remember Nigel Farage came out straight away saying, we've got to support Israel. Well, why? Why does it concern me? I think part of the reason there is because he's potentially looking for a future career in the United States. And as I've pointed out, the conservative movement is very pro-Zionist. So I think there's a little bit of him kind of sucking up to the Israel lobby there. But yeah, and even just recently with the newly elected leader of UKIP, Lewis Perry, I think her name is, she got paid 3 months before the UKIP election to go visit Israel. So there is clearly, a lobby out there trying to, garner sympathy for Israel. This sentiment's not coming, bottom up from the general public.
No, I saw that. Lewis Perry, she went out there with Andre Walker, didn't they? They had a lot of videos of them in Israel. And one of the first things she said after she became the new UKIP leader, I think it was earlier this week, was saying we need to support them. They've got nowhere else to go. So clearly nailing her colours to the mast on that issue. I remember Farage saying that isn't it dreadful that Wembley Stadium isn't going to put up the colours of the Israeli flag after the 7th of October to show their support for Israel? But, I think that the Football Association actually there did the right thing in either, in staying neutral and not putting the colours of either side up. But they did fly a big Israeli flag over Downing Street. And later on, when some Palestine protesters shone a banner on some words onto the side of Big Ben, everyone was up in arms. But then it's fine to put the Israeli colours up on Parliament, but it's not fine to put the colours of the other side up on Parliament.
I tell you what,
there's absolute hypocrisy there. Yeah.
I'm sick
Yes.
to death of seeing other countries' flags constantly being
Mm,
flown in public in our country. I'm sick of seeing the Ukraine flag. I'm sick of seeing the Palestine flag. I'm sick of seeing the Israeli flag. I'm sick of all of it. I only want to see the England flag and the Union flag. That's the only flags
mm,
I want to see in public. But no, we
mm.
keep being dogmatically told we've got to support this regime, we've got to be against that regime. And it's just really fatiguing, isn't it?
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the only flag we should see. The only flags that we should see on our public buildings. I know when I was in the London Assembly, Sadiq Khan would fly the EU flag, the Ukraine flag. I don't know what flag he's got up now, but I would say we have the Union flag, the England flag, and maybe the London flag because that's City Hall in London. None of this other stuff. And certainly no pride flags. That's another thing that goes up now all over the place. And this Pride Progress flag with this abominations of blue and pink and brown and black and any other color you can think of to indicate all of the cultural Marxist intersectionality that they want to celebrate, which is absolute nonsense and shouldn't be done by our public servants. Yeah, completely ridiculous there. Well, look, Alec, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's been really nice to talk to you about what's going on and a wider discussion as well. It'd be great to have you back on sometime soon to talk about other things. I'm sure we've got a lot of things in common that we can agree on. So that's fantastic. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. And we'll see you again sometime on today's News Talk, I'm sure.